Turn with me to the Old Testament book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 34. 2 Chronicles, chapter 34, and at verse 14. When you found it, I've got it. Reading from the New Revised Standard Version, there we find in verse 14. While they were bringing out the money that had been brought into the house of the Lord, the priest Hilkiah found the book of the law of the Lord given through Moses. Hilkiah said to the secretary Shaphan, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan. Verse 18. The secretary Shaphan informed the king, the priest Hilkiah has given me a book. Shaphan then read it aloud to the king. When the king heard the words of the law, he tore his clothes. Then the king commanded Hilkiah, Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Abdon, son of Micah, the secretary Shaphan, and the king's servant Asaiah, go, inquire of the Lord for me, and for those who are left in Israel and in Judah, concerning the words of the book that has been found. For the wrath of the Lord that is poured out on us is great, because our ancestors did not keep the word of the Lord, to act in accordance with all that is written in this book. And then finally, verse 29. Then the king sent word and gathered together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. The king went up to the house of the Lord with all the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests and the Levites, all the people, both great and small. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of the Lord. The king stood in his place and made a covenant before the Lord to follow the Lord, keeping his commandments, his decrees, and his statutes with all his heart and with all his soul, to perform the words of the covenant that were written in this book. I want to talk for just a few moments on the subject, the stage or the pulpit. The stage or the pulpit. Earlier this year in Macedonia, we decided to begin a restoration process of our 124-year-old fellowship hall. Somewhere along the line, you know how we go through these things, we follow the trends and what we do inside our homes with the interior. Someone thought it best to put wall paneling up over the beautiful tin wall and drop ceilings over the beautiful tin ceiling, and so we just decided to pull all of that out and do a restoration job. Now, you know that it's difficult changing anything in a church. Somebody ought to say amen. And in a 124-year-old building, it's especially difficult. And so you can imagine that there was a great deal of debate about what should go and what should stay. And as true to form as it is, it's never the things that you expect that will be the major issues with people. That you think that it's going to be one thing that'll be the deal breaker, but that just breezes on through and nobody raises an issue. But then the one thing that you never even thought of, and all of a sudden, the project comes to a halt. That's what happened to us when we got to the issue of what to do with this old stage that sat in the back of the fellowship hall. In the trustee meeting, we went back and forth for almost an hour about whether or not to take the stage out or to leave it in. The argument centered around two different trains of thought. One group of us said that the stage had always been there and that it was a part of the construction in 1883 when the building went up. Therefore, it was a historical part of the building that should not be touched. The other part of us said, well, I've got pictures, and I remember seeing the fellowship hall without the stage, and I remember when there was nothing there. And so we went back and forth until finally we took it for an up or down vote. The ayes had it, and we decided to tear the old stage out. Well, a couple of days into demolition, called the person who was working as our foreman, one of the members of the church, and he said, Rev, I think you need to come down here and take a look at this. we started tearing out the stage, but I told them to stop until you could come by and look and tell us what you think. I got down there and discovered that God has a real sense of humor. Because God has a way of showing you that nobody is right. What was underneath the stage all of those years was a beautiful pulpit, completely intact, with a mahogany altar that went around. The wood beams that were sticking out that we thought were, in fact, I just assumed because they were painted over that they were part of the metal support beams that had been in the rest of the fellowship hall. But when they were stripped down, they exposed that the beautiful mahogany went all the way up into the ceiling. And with that, we all just stood in front of it, kind of looking at one another, not really knowing what to say, except that God is still in control. While the recovery of the pulpit underneath the stage is a significant archaeological find, one that we hope will bring people throughout their tours of Camden into our church to see what is a remnant of a time that's gone by. It's more than just a historic find. It is something that, if we look at it right, I believe provides a spiritual lesson from our past about our future. You see, the discovery made me initially begin to think a few things. And one of the things that popped in my mind immediately was, how does a church ever get to a place that they feel comfortable enough to put a stage on top of a pulpit and an altar? What happened in that official board meeting when they were talking about putting a stage on top of the pulpit? What, was the pastor out of town? I'm trying to figure out what happened that somebody didn't step up and say there's something wrong with putting a stage on top of the pulpit. The pulpit is not just about wood furnishing. The pulpit and the altar rail represent the lifeblood of African Methodism. They represent what is foundational in who we are. The pulpit itself represents the preaching of the gospel. And the altar rail represents prayer and our access to God through our own inward communication. Our church was given birth at prayer time. That as they knelt down to pray at St. George's, they were yanked up, and as they were pulled up off their knees from prayer, a new church was born. And yet, that place that is so elemental to African Methodism, someone just put a stage on top and called it a day. Didn't even leave a historical marker to let those of us left behind know that there is an altar and a pulpit underneath the stage.